I think if you organise the date, then you should pay for it because you're the one that's organised it, so you know how much it's going to cost.
Jamie Johnston,
ADHD dating expert.
And founder of neurodivergent dating app, Mattr.
We're trying to change the whole dating thing because it's so overwhelming to everyone. You don't know where you're meant to go. You don't know what that type of person's like. You don't know about the things they've got underneath the bonnet. What we're trying to do is just look at overwhelm across the board and see how we can change it from the matching to the actual time you're going to go on the date.
What do you think guys look for in a partner, ADHD or otherwise?
Yeah, so I'll give you the top 3 things you can do which are really, really going to kill your dating profile. Number 3 is the gym selfie in the mirror with the top off. Posing with wads of cash, that's the second thing. And the number 1 thing you can do, and I think this is much more targeted to women, is have a filtered selfie. And your question was, what do people look for within males to females? And so the number 1 thing that people look out for across men and women is, and I think also one thing that I would definitely try and do is, what you put out, you will attract.
What are the biggest mistakes women are making in their online dating profiles?
I think it's...
This episode is dedicated to anyone who catastrophizes and thinks their world's going to end when someone asks them for a quick chat without any context. I know you've probably heard this a million times on other podcasts, but following or subscribing really helps the show. And the more followers we get, the more likely it is that I'm able to book new, exciting, and insightful guests for the show. So, if you subscribe, I will continue to keep to my word and promise to never let this podcast be sponsored by Huel. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi Alex, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to do this.
I want to start with a personal question. When was your first memory of feeling different?
Yeah, good question. Obviously, when I was really young, I got in trouble a lot for things that I didn't know why I would get in trouble for. You know, the usual things you probably think about with ADHD, disrupting class, talking too much, acting like a class clown. But I think the real moment for me where I found out about my difference was we used to do a thing called dictation, which was essentially, in English, I mean, plenty of people listening to this would have done this, where they read from a book, you write it down, then they mark how well you did your spelling, starts off easy, gets harder. And I found it very difficult to get past even the first few seconds of this dictation, and everyone would just be writing, and it would used to fill me with anxiety. And my scores were by far the lowest in the class. And I remember actually having to go and see the teacher, and I got in trouble for it. So it wasn't like, how can we help you? But it was like, this is so bad, you know, you're 7 years old or whatever it was, you should be at a far greater level. And that's where I kind of being removed from a class, being told I was way behind. And that's when I got my dyslexia diagnosis and my first kind of introduction to neurodivergence, or as it was known back then, special needs, because I mean, neurodivergence certainly wasn't a word that we used in the 90s. So I think there was always moments with the naughtiness, but the real kind of, this is it was that time. And I vividly remember that experience and how kind of traumatic that was for me as a young kind of boy, and not getting help when, you know, that's what I needed. I needed help, not telling off. But yeah, that was when it was.
And on top of the dyslexia, are there any other diagnoses?
Yeah, so I would say recently, but so 3-4 years ago, ADHD, which I'm sure the people listening to this will be very clued up, which is the kind of the hybrid of autism and ADHD combined. So again, something I've been very familiar with. I think it's, if you have ADHD and you find out what ADHD is, you're like, oh, I've got that. I have all these symptoms. And in very typical ADHD fashion, I kind of put off the diagnosis until later on in life. And I actually tried to get diagnosed when I was 24. And for those listening that don't know how the diagnosis works, you get a big questionnaire, loads of questions in it. Then someone that's known you your whole life does the exact same questionnaire, and they correlate it to see where it matches up. And I just did all this at home. I think it was my mum that did it with me. And I just put it in a normal envelope and just posted it with a second-class stamp. And it was probably weighed at least half a kilo. And it never got to the psychiatrist. And she basically turned around and said to me, well, you're going to have to redo it. And that means you're going to have to pay for it again. And obviously I asked my parents for the money for this. So I lied to my mum and told her they said I didn't have it, because I was in such shame and shock about this incident I did. I knew that I would probably incur wrath for asking her for more money again. So from 24 to 31, I basically knew I had a condition but couldn't access any support, medication. I felt like an imposter. So yeah, 31 was when I got the official kind of diagnosis, yeah.
And how long ago was it that you founded this dating app?
So the idea really for that app came towards the kind of in that year of 2031 after my diagnosis, and I'll give a little bit of kind of backstory to that. But we launched the app. It'll be coming up to 3 years, which is like the business we launched. It'll be 3 years in September, so in a couple of months. And the actual product was launched last year. So for a couple of the years, I was saving up money so that I could start it up. I was raising money. We were doing a hell of a lot of data, speaking to the community and the people that would be using this, and really building up the socials and getting a waiting list, because we wanted to launch and have people using it. We didn't want to kind of, because it's a dating app, right? If you come onto something and it says no one around you, it's a bad experience. So we spent a lot of time working with getting the community onto the waiting list. So we had a product with people on it. So yeah, it's 3 years since the brand launch, but coming up to, it'll be year now in September when the product launched.
Do you see a common theme crop up when it comes to difficulties revolving around ADHD and dating?
I do actually, yeah. So if we look at ADHD and the dopamine and defect of dopamine, what can spike and withdraw and RSD and all these things, if you then throw them into dating, which is one of the most nerve-wracking things you can do anyway, regardless of whether you've got a neurodivergence, then add ADHD on top of that, it changes the narrative completely. And it's something that I think, if you have ADHD or if you even have ADHD traits, it's something you definitely need to articulate and communicate with a partner, because only through that communication and that understanding are you going to ever have a better relationship. And it was only really when I was diagnosed and started learning more about ADHD and learning more about what's me and what's ADHD and what are things I need to work on, or what are things that are just really difficult because they're just ingrained in me. That's how I'm wired up, and how that then affects relationships, both professionally, personally, and romantically. I think that's really, really important. And I think, yeah, ADHD and dating is a whole thing, which is very, very interesting, but also quite nerve-wracking.
What do you think ADHD or AuDHD people look for in a partner?
Understanding, I think, and compassion to know that sometimes we can't control actions, and the body takes over. It kind of goes onto ADHD autopilot is what I say sometimes. And having someone that understands, actually that's because they are wired up in a certain way, that can make such a great difference. I mean, I'm in a very committed relationship now, something that I actually thought was completely impossible for me to have because of my past history of crashing and burning or completely love bombing, which is something that ADHD people do a lot, which is finding a new shiny thing and completely being infatuated by them. It's like, oh, let's go on a holiday for our second date type of thing. And then, hot fires burn fast, right? You lose the interest for that person very, very quickly. So I thought like marriage and kids and long-term was not for me. And I kind of spent a lot of my late 20s kind of pretending that I didn't care about that. So, it's not for me. I'm going to be that cool uncle at the parties, and, I'm going to, be going to Ibiza when I'm 50 years old, and you'll be, dads and all this kind of stuff. And then I met someone who was extremely understanding of who I was and, didn't beat me up for things that I did, which I knew were bad. And that completely changed my life, my mental health, how I view myself, how I carry myself, everything changed. And that's why Mattr is so important to me, because when you tell people you're a founder of a dating app, their brain automatically goes to things like Tinder or Hinge or, dating dilemmas and, hookups. And what we're doing is completely different. We're trying to create this environment where people can be emotionally vulnerable, express their differences, and be in a space where people are going to be receptive to that. So I think dating is actually very important, because I always say this is I'm not selling a dating app, I'm selling love and happiness. That's what we do. We make people happier, hopefully. We help them find love. And I think that's the nicest thing in my opinion, any company can do, is make people feel better in their lives.
And if someone goes to Mattr and they download it, in what way does it differentiate itself from the other more well-known apps?
Yeah, so I think if we look at this in two ways, let's look at the purpose and let's look at the product. The purpose of what we're trying to do is to create a space. We call our strapline is date different. So we're dating for the different. We're not specifically just for neurodivergents. We're for anyone that feels different. And I'll come on to that in a bit more detail about why we went down that route, because I think it's quite interesting. And then so when you come onto us, we're gonna do a lot of stuff around your personality. So we're really, really gonna try and get your personality across, because dating apps, of course, are very, very, superficial. It's, they've changed the narrative in such a bad way where people have become commodities and you just flick people away. The swiping, the Tinder mechanism is a flick away. It's a throw them away. And these are people we're talking about right now. And no one's really got a chance to kind of get their personality across. So we do a personality quiz when you come on that will help you match with other people. We show you guys are really connected personality-wise. And that might be the extra 5% you need to give that person a chance. So we do a lot around personality. And then we ask you something called Honesty Box. So Honesty Box is split into two sections. One of the sections is about shouting about something you really like about yourself. And we find that, especially as British people, we're not like, yeah, I'm amazing. We're quite stoic and stuff. So we ask you, that can be a skill you've got. So it could be like, I'm amazing at chess, or I'm a great chef. Or it could be something like, I'm really empathetic, and I think ADHD people have got such fantastic intrinsic things that make them amazing, which neurotypicals don't have in abundance. I think empathy, I think ADHD people are seriously empathetic, and I think they've got amazing intuition. I call it the spidey sense.
Yes.
We can tell people that we were talking earlier before we came on air about people's energies, and I can feel energies from people because I'm in a room with someone and I think, that's giving me bad energy over there. And I think ADHD people have got that in abundance, which I think is a great quality. So we allow you to really be open about what you're great at, what makes you, a great person to go on a date with. And then the second side of thing is called You'll Need to Know This. You'll need to know this. And everyone does this on the app, by the way. And because you're making everyone do it, that anxiety about, oh my God, what am I going to write in here? People are going to judge me. It goes away because everyone has to do it. And this can be here where you can talk about timekeeping. This can be where you talk about your fidgeting. For me, it's eye contact, that I used to really struggle with on dates. But it doesn't even have to be that serious. It could just be like, I don't like loud noises. Don't take me anywhere that's going to be really loud. Or, everyone loves dogs, right? That's kind of like the one thing, but some people don't. I've got a good friend of mine who's absolutely petrified even of tiny little fluffy things. So she can write in that thing, look, I'm just petrified of dogs, right? But, you don't want to write that down on a mass market product or something about ADHD or how you struggle with anxiety, because it's so competitive and there's so many people that any blemish is going to, get you, flicked away in an already hyper competitive market. So that's how we get you onto the product. So we're very much about the personality. Then how the actual product works is we talked about getting that personality through. You can't just like someone on our product. You have to message. You have to write to them and say, why am I intruding in your life, basically? And to do that, you have to open the profile. So you can't just write a message on their picture. So we're changing the way that you interact with the product. So you get onto the profile to write the message. You can read more about them. It's not just pictures. It's what, and we ask really great questions in there as kind of like prompts. We call them sparks. Things like, you could really help me with this. Instead of saying, I'm bad at this, it's reframing the narrative, because there's a thing called helper's high, where by helping people, you get dopamine. It's like when you help an old lady cross the road, or you pick someone's buggy up when they're walking down the tube. That actually makes people feel really good. And so when you see a question where it says, you could help me out with this, and you can help them with that, that's a great opening line where those people are exchanging value to each other. And so there's all little things and nuances all through the product where it's not so obvious, but actually when you look at it, now I've explained it to you, a lot of it is really helping those that will need that help without making it like, oh, I'm on this app and it's for these types of people and I can't be on the other apps, and making it so obvious. I think what we're trying to do is just make it subtle and make it more enjoyable.
There's probably quite a lot of people listening who are a bit torn. On the one hand, the idea of meeting someone new is very exciting, but also on the other hand, the idea of meeting someone new is filled with anxiety over what are they going to think of them and how am I going to come across. So can you walk us through what happens to someone with an ADHD mind when they go on a dating app?
On the app specifically rather than the date?
On the app at this stage, yeah.
Okay, so let's look at what the history of dating apps and what was out there, and then we'll come to what we're doing. So Tinder was obviously the kind of the market leader within this, and took it from online dating, which is something that is much more kind of familiar to an older generation, and made that much more for the young people. And I was 22, I think, when Tinder came out, and I just remember working in a marketing agency, and it, excuse the pun of this, but it spread like wildfire. Everyone was like Tinder, and then everyone's like, yeah, swiping. And it really kind of changed, because normally you would go in a bar or meetup or a sports club or whatever it is that you did to meet people, and there would be a select amount of people you could engage with there. And then you're now got the whole of London, basically, your fingertips. And it's so hard and fast, and there's so many more options, and everything is just like swipe, 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 swipe. And back then it was completely free because they were doing what we're doing now, which is getting the users on to then be able to monetize. Now, if you've got ADHD and you're given like a little tool in your hand and go, this is absolutely unlimited, near enough, you can swipe until your finger cramps in, if you like. That, and the fact that you're doing something where you're connecting with someone, and if you get a like, the dopamine spike from that is possibly one of the biggest dopamine spike. You think someone's given you huge validation where they think, out of all these people on all that I could have done, I've given you some validation here. An ADHD person having that in their hands, it's very dangerous for controlling dopamine. Now let's then go a bit fast forward to monetization. So now all of these apps are monetized, right? Where you get a certain amount of swipes, you can buy different profiles, you can boost your profile. Now put that in the hands of someone with ADHD, and you're getting a very worrying thing where not only can they get these dopamine spikes, but they can start spending a lot of money on these things. And they're not controlled in the same way gambling companies are. So I feel like ADHD people going onto these products need to be aware of how they work and the mechanisms behind them, because if they don't, they can end up, and we did an interview with the BBC a couple of weeks ago where I talked about dating app addiction, which is going on them, swiping, connecting, getting the dopamine, talking to these random people, going to meet them. And I was more interested in just filling my brain up with the dopamine than I was the actual dates. And so I think they are a dangerous place if you do not understand how they work. And I think specifically for ADHD people, they should be aware of that.
And if we go forward in time slightly to a first date, can you explain what's going on inside the ADHD mind at that stage, just before they enter that restaurant or bar or wherever it is, and also why that could potentially be addictive?
Yeah, but I think it goes back to, the dopamine side of things. It's very exciting going on a first date. It's like going into the wilderness. Will they like me? Will they hate me? It's like you said it yourself. It's like filled with excitement or filled with fear and dread. And, ADHD people like talking about themselves, of course. They like learning about other people. And so a date is essentially like a swapping. It's like a mini interview, right? But you do it in a funner environment than sitting across a desk with papers in front of you. And so, you get this, this full of excitement. And then obviously, like I mentioned there, you can obviously get the dread. But I think it's about how they position themselves to what they're doing. So it depends on the mindset is the word I'm looking for here. The mindset of the person going into it. What do they want to get out of this? Do they want that person just to like them because they've got RSD and they really want that validation? Are they really looking for a long-term committed relationship? So that's a different type of anxiety because they want there to be a next one. Are they just going there for a bit of fun? Then that's a different type of thought as well. So I think going through the mind of the ADHD person depends on what that ADHD person wants to achieve from that meeting, from that date. And those things can be very, very different.
Do you think modern dating apps cause self-esteem issues within the ADHD brain?
100%. Yeah, 100%, because they're competitive, right? So, look, none of the big dating apps are going to tell you how their algorithms work because that's their secret sauce. But essentially, a lot of them use something that's called collaborative filtering. Now, everyone who's listening to this will have been exposed to collaborative filtering, whether or not they've been on a dating app or not, because it's what Netflix and Amazon use to recommend you things once you've watched something. So you've watched Saving Private Ryan, it's recommended you another World War II film because the person that watched that liked that. It takes past users' behavior and thinks that your likes and dislikes are based on that. Now, if you look at collaborative filtering from a dating app point of view, it's very, very discriminatory and it's very, very racist because minority racial groups get the least amount of likes and therefore their profiles get seen the least. So if I give you an example to explain this, and there's a great blog on this called Monster Match, which explains collaborative filtering for dating apps. If you look at kind of, let's take you and I as an example, but you are a cohort of people and you join 3 months before me, I join after you, and you're really interested, you really like blonde women, right? But you don't like Asian women, okay? I'm obviously not saying that, but that's just for this example, disclaimer. And I like blonde women, but I also do like Asian women, but I'm liking all the same women that you are. It's presuming that I don't like the Asian women, right? So that leads itself to a very competitive place where people are trying everything they can to not get caught in these filters. And that can actually be near enough impossible for people just because of how they look. And that's causing huge self-esteem issues, especially for minority groups who are already, discriminated against in other places. But that is particularly one of the worst places that they can be.
And is there anything people can do to avoid getting trapped in these filters, or is it an inevitability based on the design?
Well, that's one of the reasons that we exist, because they create these competitive elements where the more points you get, the more likes you get, the higher up you get shown to different types of people that are what people perceive as better value. And so they don't put anything down that's perceived as negative about them. They don't talk about their anxieties, their griefs, their neurodivergences. They try and use AI. There's so many AI dating app programs now where you can put your profile through and it'll tell you how to amend it. They edit photos, but if you are of a particular race, there's nothing you can do about that, right? And so then that gives you self-esteem issues, thinking, well, if only I was just a different race, I might be able to do better on these products. So we're creating an environment where these products are pitting us all against each other and actually stripping us down to just fictitious, superficial, profiles. And I think that what we're trying to do is really remove all that and make it a much more human approach. It's still digital, we understand that, but we're trying to make it as human as possible.
Mm. Are there any other ways these dating apps are designed to keep us stuck to them, keep us addicted to them, that might be particularly dangerous for the ADHD brain?
Well, yeah, look, I don't want to get any sort of lawsuit after me, but you can read between the lines on this. I'm sure anyone that uses dating apps will know which product I'm talking about. So a lot of what they do is the algorithm will try and work out what you like and they'll gatekeep it, right? But they'll show it to you if you pay for it. There's a certain product that uses a mechanism called roses. I'm sure, again, you'll be able to work out which one that is. But it's kind of working out from what you're liking and disliking, like we were talking about with collaborative filtering, what it is you like, then showing you them, but making you pay for them, right? And that's really dangerous because it's kind of like you can have all the stuff you want, but you got to pay for it. And by the way, there's absolutely no guarantee that any of these people are gonna match with you or whatever. It's just showing you that these are the types of people that you like. And particularly with ADHD is when it shows you something you really want and it's right in front of your face and it's there the whole time. That can be very, very hard to push back on. And especially now, like I said, with monetization, if you get stuck in that cycle where you are getting addicted to them, it can cost you more than just dopamine spiking. It can cost you actual cash. And I actually find it very hilarious and funny. And I don't think you have to be any sort of marketeer to realize that if an app's slogan is designed to be deleted, but then they reward you for taking out longer subscription packages, that could be slightly disingenuous. So what you want me to delete it, but you're also going to give me money off if I stay for longer? Which one is it? So yeah, I think there are quite a few ways that they can keep you trapped in, because their whole business model is to keep you on, right? They don't want you to leave because they're losing customers. Dating apps are one of the only products in the world where the better the product is, the more customers they lose, right? Which in a way can be a good thing, because you can go and tell all your friends, I met this great guy, girl, whatever, and we met on this product. But they don't want to be churning more than they're putting in the funnel at the top. And we've got a completely different, and that was one of the things we wanted to look at, which is the business model when we founded Mattr, and how do we provide value to the user while not addicting them, and still, because we're not a charity, make money for us in an ethical way. And I think that's quite an interesting thing.
Really important to know. Really important information. Pre-technology and post-technology, how do you think dating has changed? And why do you think so many relationships seem to fizzle out so fast?
I think it's the paradox of choice is one thing, which is like there's just so much choice with everything now. Back in the day, so I'm 34, so if you wanted to get food delivered to your house, there was a pizza place, you rung it up, they used to put a leaflet through your door, you'd have to read that long card number off the front. It was just laborious. And that was literally it, right? Pizza would be the only real thing that would be delivered. And I remember my friends talking about this utopia where one day we'll be able to get McDonald's on delivery, and how that's just like standard. So with everything in this day and age, there's so much choice. And with choice, it makes you think negatively about what you have. So if Tinder comes to you and say, like, you want to date women from 25 to 40 in London with a 15, 20 mile radius is how far you'll go, that's hundreds of thousands of people. So if you meet someone, you're like, oh, they're ticking all the boxes, but they could be a little bit better here. I think I read something about this 90-10, which is never swap 90 for 10, right? The 10% you're missing, everyone puts this huge value on it. When you've got 90% of what you want, everyone's looking for that one particular 10% of something they don't have. And I think in this age of 2024, where everything's at a fingertip, taxi comes in 5 seconds. If I want Vietnamese or something, Moroccan food, I can get it. It's all there. Everything is so hard and fast. That's really changed the dating game. If I can see 100,000 people to date with, then of course I'm going to date someone. I go, oh, are they the best option? Do I want to settle here? And I think that's really what's been the biggest catalyst for change in dating in the digital age.
Truly fascinating.
Yeah.
I want to talk about ghosting, and I know you've got a lot of advice for people who are worried about going on a first date. But first, I want to ask you about your ADHD item. I ask all my guests to tell me an item that most represents ADHD in their life, and we'll do the reveal. You've chosen a watering can. I'll pass that to you. Why have you chosen a watering can as your item?
Yeah, this is it. I think this will... people listening will be laughing at this or go, goodness, that's me. So getting from one side of a room to the other with ADHD is sometimes very, very difficult because unless that room is like a photography studio of just completely white walls, a room like, look at this room here, it's absolutely littered with things, right? And you could be going, oh, I'm going to go make a cup of tea. But then when you get there, you realize that the counter is dirty. So you end up getting the Dettol out and cleaning the counter. And then you go to put your, like a cup away or something like that. And then you realize that the rack has got like dried plates and things on. You put them away. And then you're standing in the kitchen going, what the hell am I even in here for? And then you sit down and you go, oh, the cup of tea, then you go back. And the watering can for me was like the biggest trigger. It used to sit in front of where I used to work. It's been moved now. And every time I kind of caught a glimpse of it, I would just have this panic that I hadn't watered the plants, and I would go and pick it up and just water all the plants. And every time I saw it, it was like, the poor plants are going to die. So this really symbolized ADHD for me because without fail, if I saw this thing, plants were getting watered. And so I think it really reminds me of ADHD because it's the most distracting thing I can see is the watering can. But luckily we spoke before and the plants in this room are fake, so they don't need any. I can kind of pretend to be a child, can't I, with the fake water. So
you can put that. Hugely relatable. I was in my office in my home the other day and I went into the kitchen to find a pen. And when I was in the kitchen, I looked at my phone for a second, Facebook, and I saw someone talking about home renovation. And I remembered that I had a mirror in my garden that needed to come down. So I went downstairs, found a chisel and a hammer, took this mirror off the garden wall, went back to my kitchen, put my phone back, went back to my desk, and I had forgot the pen that I originally went in the kitchen. And I posted about it on LinkedIn and it got like 700-800 likes. And it's just nice to know that you're not the only one who goes off on these side quests.
Oh yeah. I mean, dust is my enemy. Like I'm a very clean kind of ADHD person where I'm always seeing dust. I was kind of, get at it. And if I see any of it anywhere, again, it's a bit like that. But I couldn't really ask you to bring dust in, Alex, could I? We just have a plate of dust down there. But yeah, it's a real trigger for me. So I feel your pain completely.
I want to do the washing machine of woes. The washing machine is actually my ADHD item. And every week I ask my Instagram community to send me in their biggest ADHD woes. And I put it in the washing machine because for me it represents memory loss. I always forget my laundry in the machine. Yeah. Do you suffer from that? Yeah,
of course. Yeah,
a lot of us do. A lot of us
deal with the dreaded fustiness where it has to go back in, or do you risk it?
The smell of mold is quite familiar. This week, in the washing machine of woes, I was married for 10 years, pre-dating apps.
Oh, wow.
And just back on the market. The dating experience is so different and now overwhelming. Do you have any advice on how to manage the overwhelm and what to expect in this massive dating pool?
That is an absolutely fantastic question. So whoever wrote that, brilliant, because that, let me tell you a little piece of data which will make the person who wrote this in feel like, again, like you said, that they're not alone. When we started the app, we did roughly around 3,500 pieces of research with people, right? And that, honestly, I'm not afraid to say that, like, I read through the replies. They were not one-word replies. They were like paragraph. And honestly, that's probably the teariest I've been in like a long time other than someone's death, because, you're reading about like, this one girl was saying how she got attention all the time from men, and people said she was very attractive, but she just couldn't get out of the door because of her anxiety. And she used to ghost people and turn off her phone. And, really having a product where she could talk about the anxiety up front would be really helpful to her. And the number one thing people said when I asked them to explain dating apps in one word across all target groups, from neurotypicals, neurodiverse, racial and sexual minority, was they're overwhelming. They cause overwhelm. So whoever wrote that in, you are certainly not the only one. So my suggestion would be if you're going to use the unlimited ones, which we're only available in London right now. We're growing out throughout the UK, but as a dating app, you have to go location by location so people are close to each other. So if you are going to use the unlimited ones, it's very much about setting yourself timers and saying, okay, I'm going to invest some time here to do online dating, and that's it. The problem with dating is you really need to have your notifications on, because if people are messaging you and you forget, then you can come across like a bad person because you're not replying to them. But have some time, set aside some time, say I'm gonna devote 30 minutes of my evening, or whatever it is you want to use them. If you are in London, you can use Mattr, because we do that for you. So we only give you 6 people a day to connect with, and we tell you why we've connected you with them. So it says, we've put you together because of X, Y, and Z, right? So we actually tell you this is what the app's doing. And so you can't actually see more than 6 people, right? So once you've done your 6, that's it. So set aside some time. Don't pressurize yourself. And I think the one piece of advice over everything is start thinking in a different way to what dating is and what success on a dating app looks like. And I always give this great line, which I will credit my wonderful sister for, which is, be for someone, not for everyone. When you're in a huge space like Tinder or Bumble or Hinge, mass market, you become one of thousands, and you try to play the game because you want the validation of all the likes. Start being you and start turning people off. Like, they're the right people to turn off. You know, like I said, if you are petrified of dogs, like my friend Sophie is, shout out to Sophie if you're listening, then you don't want to be with someone that's going to turn up on a date with 3 dogs, do you? So you might as well say it. But she's too, people are too scared to say that because it makes them look different or whatever. And so be yourself, articulate how you feel. And yes, you might not get all of the likes. Yes, you might have to wait longer, but the people you do match with are going to provide you so much more value, and they're going to be way better connected to you in the long run. So my piece of advice to her would be, limit the overwhelm as much as you can. If you're in London, obviously download Mattr, because we do that for you. And be for someone, not for everyone. Don't feel scared to be as open up front. As she said, she's just come out of a very long-term relationship. Put that out there, because someone else on the platform might be in the exact same situation you are, and you can not bond over that, but they'll understand what you're going through, as you will they. And that can be a really nice intro to a great relationship where you've had the pain, but you're still out there trying to find the next person.
Fantastic advice. And thank you very much on behalf of the anonymous Instagram, member of the Instagram community. And if anyone does want to submit a woe for the next episodes, then do send us a DM on Instagram. Moving on, from your experience as a founder of a neurodivergent dating app, do you think people with neurodiverse conditions are more compatible, or at the very least, drawn to each other?
This is such a great question, and we don't have the data for how many neurodivergents are matching with non-neurotypicals on our platform. I wish, and we should look into that and pull that for you, because that'd be great. But from my own personal experience, I would say yes. My partner is neurodivergent. She's dyslexic. I'm dyslexic as well, but her dyslexia is much stronger than mine. Mine is more for spelling, hers is more for numbers. But I can see how things that I find very simple numerically are very difficult for her to do. And I feel the compassion for her because she struggles with it, and I help her with that. And she understands with me as well about my ADHD, where sometimes I'll be in situations where I'll feel uncomfortable, and she can see it and read it, and she understands what that is. Like ADHD people, our brain is very overwhelming as it is. Its default is just, I'm overwhelmed. There's 20 voices in your head telling you 100 million different things. Like I said, we've got the watering can, we've got the mirror in the garden to deal with at all times. So sometimes when we're lying on the couch and just doom scrolling, or just reading something, or becoming really infatuated with how the pyramids were built, or something completely random, we're actually allowing our brain just to shut down and be off. And, you might look at that as a partner who's neurotypical and be like, oh God, that lazy toe just sitting there doing nothing while there's that pile of washing that needs to be put away. But actually that person's getting ready to be able to do that pile of washing, because that's going to give you no dopamine whatsoever. And having someone on the other side that understands that is actually really beautiful, because they can just go, actually, he's not just learning about the pyramids or whatever. It's completely irrelevant, not going to help him in life. But he's allowing his brain to calm down and recharge. And I think that's really, really something that's so great about neurodivergent relationships. Of course, neurodivergent relationships can completely clash. 2 people with very, very high ADHD levels might be like, this is just carnage, right? But I'm not saying that neurotypicals and neurodiverse people cannot be together, but there has to be that understanding, and there has to be that communication. I think communication in all relationships is the absolute most important thing you can do with your partner, and do it in a way where it's not aggressive, and also do it, practice it when you don't need to. A lot of communication comes from someone's done something and I was annoyed at this and you should have done this, and it becomes aggressive. But sit down, have a tea or whatever you do, and just go through like, how could we improve this how could I improve this relationship for you? What's going to make, this better for you? And that doesn't have to be anything to do with neurodivergence. It could just be about just things that you would prefer from them, and get each other working on that and build. A relationship's about building, right? It's not going to be perfect right at the beginning. And just because you have a disagreement doesn't mean, the world's ending and you've got to break up. So I think communication is very, very important. And I think neurodivergents, yes, are drawn to other neurodivergents and work very well for me, but it doesn't mean that you can't be with a neurotypical as long as you practice that communication.
I spent a week on YouTube watching videos about the pyramids.
Yes.
Just obsessing. I can't remember any of it, so don't
I
ask
know.
me.
I think also the pyramids, I don't think they were first built in Egypt. I think they were in Mexico and around there. The Incas, didn't they build them before the Egyptians?
That was probably in my obsession what I learned, but no, don't test me. I won't remember any of it.
I know. Well, clearly.
What do you think it's like for someone who is neurodivergent but doesn't know they're neurodivergent?
Yeah.
The dating situation for them, is there a potential blind spot there?
This is a really, really good question. So I'm going to actually just answer it a little bit with something else, which is very relatable. People go to us, are you a neurodivergent dating app? And I say, we have a lot for neurodivergence, but it's not just neurodivergence that come on our platform. We're a dating app for the different, right? And that can be however you want to label yourself. Neurodivergents make up a very big population. They're not the biggest population on our app, but they make up a very, very, they're the biggest on their own, but not combined. And why did we do that? Okay, it's for a few reasons, and that comes back to this question. One, saying you're a neurodivergent dating app and you have to have a diagnosis is extremely elitist in a time where getting a diagnosis is going to cost you upwards of £1,000. It's going to probably take you, even if you go private, years now. I mean, we work with psychiatry, people from Psychiatry UK help us develop our product. And, even they stopped autism and ADHD diagnoses for months. They didn't even take on a single patient. Now they are, but there's a waiting list. So saying you had to have a diagnosis, we felt was very elitist. We also didn't know if neurodivergence wanted to be labeled as like, you have to go into this app, you can't go anywhere else, a bit like the special needs class at school, which a lot of people have a lot of trauma about, like myself. And we didn't know whether neurodivergents wanted to meet other neurodivergents solely. So coming back to your question about not knowing if you're neurodivergent and finding out if that's a blind spot, that's one of the reasons we are dating for the difference. So if you don't know you're neurodivergent, but you feel you've got an inkling, you are absolutely 100 million% more welcome to come onto our platform and to engage with everyone. And don't feel like an imposter, because I feel like there's this, if you don't have the stamp of approval from the psychiatrist, you're not worthy. I don't agree with that at all for all the reasons I've just said, especially with the money side of things. It's just not practical or achievable for a lot of people to have £1,000 that they can just spend, especially during the times we're living in now. What I would say for them is, you know your body and you know how you feel, and the best thing you can do is start reading up on that. And sod it if you don't have the piece of paper that says I'm ADHD. Start reading about ADHD and relationships if you feel you're like that, because you might be able to just work on the stuff they're saying and be able to practically put that into your relationship. So if it's the imposter syndrome that's holding you back, just drop that, forget that, and just read up. You don't have to tell anyone. You can just read up and learn about it yourself, and then hopefully that makes your situations with dating better in the future. But yes, to answer your question, it could be a potential blind spot if you're not learning about who you are and doing anything about it.
And the market research, what does that show the most common struggles are with a neurodivergent person who's looking for love?
I think, there's neurodivergence is such a big spectrum. There's so many people, dyslexics, people with autism, ADHD, ADHD like I have. And so having this kind of like one size fits all thing, like what is the number one thing, is very hard to answer. But there are common traits between all of them that you can look into, right? So impulsivity, being very love bombing, very hyper focused on someone at the beginning, like this is amazing, like we talked about it earlier, let's go on holiday for our second date, come and telling your friends, yeah, that's it, I found the one. How many times have people done that, went on this amazing date, and then ping, you get a match, you completely forget about it, you're talking to someone else now, then you forget which one was that one, which one was this one. And so there's that kind of thing where we're very hard and fast. We love to, if we think you're amazing, we'll tell you you're amazing 100 times, and then it can burn out. Impulsive, like I was saying earlier, let's just go and do that, not not thinking too much about things. These are big things that neurodivergent people do. And on the other side, if you've not articulated that you're neurodivergent and their traits, that can be fairly overwhelming to someone. So they might pull back. They're like, well, this is intense. This is quite a lot. Whereas they can take the lead and say, hey, let's just take things a little bit slower. Let's just go to the cinema. Or actually, that cinema's a terrible date. Sorry, I'm really bad. I'm really sorry that I actually even said that. Don't do cinema. But like, let's go for a walk or go crazy golf or whatever it is. If the person on the other side can slow it down for you, essentially like what we do as a product is we actually slow it down for you. So you can't even if you want to go crazy with the ADHD dopamine, overwhelm, because we don't allow it. But if you've articulated that through communication with someone, that can really, really help. And they're big traits, being very, very interested in things, then losing interest, impulsivity, not understanding social cues and sarcasms and things, maybe being a bit too intense for the other person when you first meet them. These are all kind of common things. And it comes down to all being misunderstood. So like I said, communication is very, very important for this.
I was laughing when you said booking a holiday, because my current partner, on our second date, we went to Greece.
Oh, there you go. Second date, that's what I said.
We went out for dinner in Brighton and we had a lovely meal. And afterwards, and I now look back and think it might be some mild autism. I said to her afterwards, I said, so shall I get you a taxi home? Giving her options. Do you want to carry on the night or do you want to call it a night? And she took that to mean that I wasn't interested. Let's finish the night here. We didn't, we carried on. But she has since told me that she took that very literally. And she took that to mean that I wasn't interested. Let's end the night here. Yeah. So she was very downtrodden for a couple of weeks. And then I texted her saying, do you want to go to Greece?
She's like, what the hell is going on here?
5 years later, and we're all still together.
Hunky-dory, yeah.
Do you think that's quite a common misconception? Communication struggles, perhaps during a first date, post first date, not recognizing if you're on the same page or not?
100%, because you're neurodivergent or neurotypical or anything, going on a date is very nerve-wracking and it leads to kind of stepping around on eggshells. So you can overthink things that have been said that have been taken either too literally or not literally at all and misconstrue what they mean completely. As you've just really nicely pointed out to me, which is you were trying to do something, nice. You thought that, it was time to end the night and you were going to help her get to her destination, being very gentlemanly of you, I may add. And she took it as like, you want to get rid of me. And then a couple of days later, you're like, actually, I want to spend loads of time with you in a 4-hour flight. Yeah. So, it's again, we're talking about it a lot on this podcast, but just communicating that. And I think a lot of people are very nervous to actually ask people what they mean because they feel like I should know this. Whereas I think just if you have doubts, just ask that person, oh, sorry, did you mean it like this or did you mean it like that? And you can just say it in a tone of voice which is quite jovial and they can explain it to you. But I think communication on all dates, it's a very tense environment. And the first date is obviously the most nerve-wracking, especially if you've been talking for a while on of an app. I met my partner on an app. Wasn't Mattr because it didn't exist before people asked me that. But we met on an app, which is great because then I can actually look at it and see how I can change this. But it worked for me. And I always say that I never hold back from saying that. It worked for me. We're engaged. I was, like I said, never thought that the long-term thing would be something I could do. But we spent 2 weeks talking because she was away. Now, 2 weeks on a dating app is a long time, especially through text. And then we led on to voice notes, then we did calling. So when I went on the date, I felt like I'd been on a few dates with her already. And so I was very nervous. And being nervous and having ADHD is like, you're kind of sitting there, I was trying to stop any kind of stimming or, very good at masking, trying to be very, straight and not fidget and all that kind of stuff. And I was very kind of hyper tense about saying the wrong thing and whatever it is like that. And so I think if everyone just bit of breath work, take it down a bit and just ask questions if you need to, if you didn't understand it literally, and get that communication going. But I also think having a phone call, it's so old school, right? To pick up the phone or FaceTime or anything before you go on the date can kind of make your first date a lot easier for you because you've kind of got a little bit of a communication going already, and also you're starting to pick up a little bit on their body language. So I think anyone that is nervous about first dates and things like that, do a FaceTime date before. It costs you nothing. You can do it in your own home in an environment you're comfortable with, and you'll really start to pick up on that person's body language a little bit, and then you can move on to the physical date.
I think a lot of people get quite anxious about feeling like they have to conform with the stereotypical image of what a first date looks like, i.e. they have to go out for dinner, they have to sit opposite someone at a dinner table, very close, maintain eye contact, small talk. That could be literal hell for a lot of neurodivergent folk. Mm-hmm. Do you see a better environment for a first date for someone with a neurodivergence?
Activity. An activity date is really good for a neurodivergent person that suffers with anxiety of eye contact or things like that. For the reasons that it changes the focus away from it being like an interview and you staring right at each other and you're doing something together. You can also make, the conversation also isn't going to be so much like, what do I say to this? It doesn't become like a question after question because you're doing something that you can conversate around. So I always say that if you are neurodivergent, if you are nervous about that whole kind of face-to-face thing, then something with an activity is really, really great. And I think, again, it's articulating what is going to be a good first date for you. I mean, one of the questions we have on our app is ideal first date or something along those lines. And we talked about it earlier, and I'm just going to come back to a question we said, which was around the business model of dating apps and how they keep you hooked in because that's what they want to do to make money. And so we thought to ourselves, well, how do we create value for the user, create value for us because we're not a charity, and slow down the churn within the product? And people always tell you as a startup, you should really focus on what you do. Like, don't have 100 things going on because you need to be really, really focused. So we create a space where people can be vulnerable, and we're specifically designed for people that feel in any way that they're different, right? That's what we do when we match them. And the second side of things is we help with your planning of your dates. And we help you get ready for dating as well. That's the two things we do. And your question there about overwhelm, we actually have around 50 partners in the product now, and they can be for things like getting ready for dates. So like relationship coaching, therapy, we've got hair and makeup stuff in there, but we've also got a load of other dates as well in there. And that can be your standard bars and restaurants, but we've also got crazy golf. We've got axe throwing now. It's all with a discount. It's all within the product. This is all unmonetized, so please grab it while it's hot, guys, but in the future it will be monetized. And that means that we can provide you with value at all times. Whenever you want, you can go and do these experiences. And your investment into the product will save you money, but it's also great for us because we can start using the AI in the product, which we're developing now, to build these perfect dates for people, and they're all there within the product. So you don't have to work out, okay, I'm going to take Alex on a date right now and I need to work out what's going to be the best date for him. The data and everything in the app product's already shown to me, and all through the product it's going to say, there you go, there's axe throwing, you can go and do that. There's your mini golf near your houses. So we're trying to change the whole dating thing because it's so overwhelming to everyone. You don't know where you're meant to go. You don't know what that type of person's like. You don't know about the things they've got underneath the bonnet because you're not creating the environment for people to be open about that. And what we're trying to do is just look at overwhelm across the board and see how we can change it from the matching to the actual time you're going to go on the date.
When you asked your neurodivergent community what their ideal dating environment was,
yeah,
do you know what the top 3 answers were?
Yeah, so it was, the answer was activity-based dates, right? And the second one, I think, was art galleries. I think and this is funny, actually, because I talked to my a guy that works with us called Henry, and his ideal first date was art gallery as well. And for me, I found that not to be good for me because it's so silent. And I thought to myself, like, I think the silence would be too eerie for me. I don't want to be in a place that's like, fabric, but I don't want to be in a place that's completely silent where, people are shushing each other because then it's like, oh, am I talking too loud? But he thought the kind of moving around, the fact that it doesn't have alcohol there, that you can really conversate and you can look at things together and give opinions on things was really good for him. And also a lot of art galleries are free. So, if you're worrying about, because there's that dreaded feeling, isn't there, with dating about who's going to pay for this? At the end when, if you go for a slap-up meal and it's going to be expensive, get that awkward card bit and, you just never know. We went around London and asked people who should pay on a first date, like a Vox Pop style thing. And no two opinions are the same. Some women get really offended if men want to pay for it, right? And you just don't know until that very moment who you're on that date with.
What do you think?
I think if you organise the date, then you should pay for it because you're the one that's organised it, so you know how much it's going to cost. Because you could invite someone that's got nowhere near the amount of liquid cash to a place that they would never be able to go to, and then spring it on them at the end when you're buying fancy food and stuff that they would never be able to buy. So I think you should be prepared always if you've organised a date and picked a venue that you should pay for it. And if they want to split it with you, then that's great in your prerogative. But be prepared, I would say, that you shouldn't be kind of putting someone in an awkward situation they wouldn't have put themselves in. But yeah, activity-based dates and art galleries was very, very high up on the favourite dates.
Broad question. Mm-hmm. What do you think guys look for in a partner, ADHD or otherwise?
Yeah. So I read this question before, and I want to, because I know we're going to talk about women as well, but I just want to talk about stuff that people don't like first, because this is across the board. And I think this is really interesting and very, very poignant because the study is about 3 weeks old. So I'll give you the top 3 things you can do, which are really, really going to kill your dating profile. So if you have these on your profile, please, I'll do them in ascending order. So we'll get to the worst one last. Number 3 is the gym selfie in the mirror with the top off. Okay. Third worst thing you can do as a turn off.
Damn.
Which is, it's funny because I always thought the holding of the fish gets the most hate online. But no, the gym top off selfie. Posing with I don't know who's ever done this, by the way, which I think is really funny. Posing with wads of cash. Got higher than the gym selfie, which makes me think that more people are posting with wads and cash than gym selfies. But I don't know. I've never ever seen anyone post with wads of cash. But yeah, that's the second thing. And the number one thing you can do, and I think this is much more targeted to women, is have a filtered selfie as your profile picture. So the bunny ears or the little dog face or anything like that. That is, I think 78% of people thought that was a huge turn off. So they're the 3 things, just the red flags. And your question was, what do people look for within males to females? I think like a caring nature. This is across the board. Both women and men want for people that they look like they care. And so the number one thing that people look out for on a dating profile across men and women is someone smiling, because it shows that you have emotion, that you smile. It's good emotion, which kind of sucks for me because I've got this real anxiety about how my teeth are. I was in like a really bad accident when I was a kid, and all my teeth are kind of fake and crooked because I this kind of reconstructive teeth thing. And so smiling's always been something I've kind of only learned to do recently. I mean, I've always known how to do it, right? But just been comfortable with doing it. So caring nature, smiling is really, really important across the board. And I think also one thing that I would definitely try and do is make your profile, and this again is across the board, but especially from men to women, is show more of your life in there. You know, hobbies are a great way for starting conversations. Don't have it as your profile picture. Make your face very clear in your profile picture. No hats, no sunglasses. Don't have a group shot as your profile picture. But have shots with your friends doing stuff. I think being part of communities is really important. Sports teams, all that type of stuff is really, really great to see. Or you being able to do pottery or showing off hidden talents you've got, I think is very, very, very important. And yeah, I think they're the main things to do. Look, you will attract what you give off. So if you are a girl and you're posting 5 bikini selfies, don't be expected when men match with you and they're going to be talking about hookups and sexual things from the off, because you've presented yourself in a way like that. You know, just like if you're a guy and you're posting pictures of you sitting on a Lamborghini with a Rolex in the photo, don't be then expected if a woman's going to be coming to you, and we're talking about heterosexual dating, of course, here, thinking only about what you can provide from a monetary aspect, and they're not going to think about your personality. What you put out, you will attract. So think about it like that. Like, what type of person are you trying to attract, rather than what is it that you're looking for? Who is it that wants to come to you, I think is the best piece of advice I would get there. So if you're looking for someone that's caring, that likes hiking, that's into animals, get that out in your profile, because the person that's going to reply to you will be interested in those things.
Truly fascinating. I wonder how many people are listening thinking, cringing at their mistakes that they've made in the past.
I need to change my profile, very quickly.
Perhaps you could answer the next question looking down the lens of the camera. Mm-hmm. Do you have a message of hope for those single neurodivergents looking for love?
There has never been a time when neurodivergence has been in the media and the awareness and spoken about as much in history as it is now. Neurodivergents are accepted everywhere. And, you know, there are so many things like this great podcast and our app where we talk specifically and help that community and can provide for you. So you're not alone now. There's platforms and communities everywhere, and you've never had it any better now, right now in this day, to be a neurodivergent and be out there. Even if you find it tough right now, it was always worse before. I think there's so much out there for you now, and there's so much understanding from neurotypicals too, that it can only ever get better.
Inspiring.
Thank you.
From the other side, what do women tend to look for in men on their online dating profiles? Yeah.
So again, caring comes across on that. So smiling was across the board. So if you can look like you're smiling or helping or doing something, that's going to work for you. But I can actually give you a very, very specific example of what, I can't remember the study of when it was, but it was like the best picture you could have as a guy on your dating app profile. And it's very, very difficult to do this, but some people will sit in here going, I've got that picture. It's the best man speech where people are laughing at what, and you're holding a microphone, was like the real thing, because It showed that someone put trust in you and gave you a very important job, that you're a trustworthy person because you're the best man. It showed that you could get up and do something that, is nerve-wracking and do it. And it showed that people had adoration for you by laughing. So it showcases to them, this person can get up and do something nerve-wracking. Someone clearly thinks this is the best option to take this very important job in the whole world, and other people are agreeing because they're laughing at this joke or whatever it is. So if there are any prior best men out there and you're not using your best man microphone picture, I would definitely go and scramble and change that. But I think, women look a lot for men that can provide, and it doesn't mean just provide in terms of wealth and money and things like that, right? It means in terms of those things I've just spoken for, like, are they able to take on leadership? Are they involved in communities? Do they have a group of friends around them? So I think having those group things that you can do, like I've always played a lot of sport. I still do now, even though I'm only 7 months away from playing veterans, which makes me feel so old. I can join a vets team, which is like the OAPs basically of football. But I've always loved that male community and having conversations like, the conversations you have after playing sport when you're all kind of working towards a common goal are really great. And there's obviously a male mental health crisis like crazy. So if you can get those kind of communities into the dating profile as well, that shows you're in touch with people trying to do stuff at the weekend that is a goal, or you've got a big group of guys behind you that you can confide in. I think that's really, really important for what women are looking for. Don't just have a profile of pictures of me, and give off, again, like I said before, just like, look at all this wealth and stuff I have, because wealth means hundreds of different things.
There's a lot of women watching and listening. Mm-hmm. What are the biggest mistakes women are making in their online dating profiles? Yeah,
I think it's just loads of pictures of themselves, which I just said. I think that's the number one mistake that women make, is just selfies. If you provide a profile which has nothing else in it other than pictures of yourself, you do come across as a narcissist. And I feel like it's much more a woman thing from what we see. Not just we see, what we see across the market, that women are much more in tune to doing that than men are. So selfies of themselves, no pictures of any friends. I honestly wouldn't care about anything in your profile, how you look, what you wrote down. You could be my perfect match. If you had 5 pictures and they were just pictures that you've taken of yourself, that would be the biggest possible red flag I could ever see, because it means that you haven't, what are you doing with your life? How are you going to benefit? How is this going to be a beneficial thing for me to be in a date with you? Like, do we share hobbies? Where are your friends? Like, that makes me think that what's up with that person if there's no pictures of any friends anywhere. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that you can do is wrong. And like I said prior in that question, you will attract what you put out. So if you put loads of pictures of you looking very sexual, expect to have sexual advances from people on the other side, because that's how you've presented yourself to the other side, and that's what they're coming back with, because that's probably what they think you want to hear, commenting you on your body and that. So that's the type of person you will attract if you present in that way.
Are there any red flags that someone should watch out for on a first date that might be a clue that person could be narcissistic?
Yeah, like gaslighting, blaming their ex for everything, any mention of their ex being a, quote unquote psycho, start running. That's probably the biggest thing they can do, is bad mouth their ex. Even if it was a terrible thing, you say it didn't work out, we broke up. You know what I mean? It was pretty tough time and we broke up. And if the other person starts asking questions, you can answer them if you want, but anyone that's bad mouthing their ex is really bad. Anyone that's not asking questions about you and getting to understand is really bad. People that, are rude to, I think the number one thing that I would just absolutely not accept is people that are rude to hospitality staff. We need the, no pleases, no thank yous, things like that. Massive red flags, because if they're rude to those people in front of you, imagine what they're like when you're not there, they're trying to impress you. So yeah, I would say bad mouthing your ex, rude to the staff, and being completely obsessed with talking about themselves and not you. Yeah, those are the 3 things I would be very, very wary of.
Fascinating. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
RSD and dating, how are they linked?
Well, RSD, is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Which means you feel rejection very deeply. And it's something that I suffer with a lot, which is funny because my previous role before setting Mattr up was I used to work in business development essentially selling. So I used to go and meet people all around the country and the world and tell them how great whatever company I was working for, how great their product was and everything. And, if I used to walk out of those rooms and every single time think they hated me. It was terrible. And if we don't get this contract, it's completely my fault. And if we did get the contract, it was never because of me either. It was because the team did something or they loved the product and it was nothing to do with me. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria and dating, either online or in person, can be very difficult to manage. And I think, I actually did a post about this the other day, which is you got to try and take stuff, even though it feels so personal. It feels so personal. I didn't feel a spark, didn't really fancy you. It is kind of personal, but it feels so personal. But there will be, I always think to myself, and this is the best piece of advice I can give, there's going to be a time in your life where the shoe's going to be on the other foot with that, where you're going to say the exact same thing to someone else. And remember, when you said it wasn't personal, you just weren't feeling it. So I always say to people that suffer with RSD, just think about the time where you've had to let someone down, and you will have done it, or you will have to in the future, and just think how you felt. You weren't wanting to give any malice to that person. You weren't attacking them in any way. You were articulating how you feel, and you didn't want to waste their time so that they could go on and find the right person for them. So just think about the time that you did it and not the time it's always happening to you, and you might be able to deal with that feeling in a bit better way.
Fantastic. Celibacy.
Yes.
Dating apps and the dopamine of an ADHDer. Is someone with ADHD more inclined to get distracted?
100 million %, of course, yeah. I think, that's just naturally, how we're wired up is, shiny, we're like the human magpies, right? It's a shiny thing over there. You've got your watering. Look behind you. It's like a whole smorgasbord of ADHD distraction items. So yeah, I think of course we can get distracted, and that can lead to a lot of arguments in relationships. For instance, I booked a weekend away with my, were we engaged then or not? No, then girlfriend, now fiance, to Bristol. And I was booking the hotel while also trying to do something else at the same time. Got to the hotel, decided to do a little bit of a blowout because I used to live in Bristol. I wanted to show her around and tell her all the amazing places. I was so excited about it. Oh, I went to this place. This is this restaurant I used to go to, 10 years ago, blah, blah, blah. And we got there and I'd booked the wrong dates. So they were like, well, tough, your date has been and gone. You didn't turn up. You booked it for the day before. And that led to her being like, well, what are we going to do now? Me being like, well, this, that, and the other, and a bit of an argument with the guy at the counter. Then an argument with her because she didn't like that. I had an argument with the guy at the counter because he wouldn't sort it out. So there was a distraction there where I was doing 100 things at once. And that ended up causing this big problem when we were on holiday, and ended up leading to an argument about this whole thing. So there's distractions like that. But there's also distractions in paying attention to your partner. I often get the kind of the click of the fingers and the, are you listening a lot, because I've just gone off into a zone of ADHD land. The window is just like an amazing place you can just look out of and just think for 40. You don't need Netflix. You can just stare out the window and just come up with all these crazy ideas. And I can get that. And Sarah would have been speaking to me for a good 5-10 minutes about X, Y, and Z and where we need to be and the person we're meeting. And I'll turn around and go, sorry, what? And, she's like, do you think I've got time to do this all day and every day? But then I'm like, I articulate, sorry, I was having a moment. I will sit with you now. Please go through everything with me. I would also say to people in ADHD or non-ADHD, well, if one of you is ADHD, there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of tools out there that you can use. The one that I love is Time Tree. It's a shared calendar, which is color coordinated, and you can plan things in there. It sends you notifications. You can attach tickets to the things, and it tells you everything. It's got a note section, and it's great. And so I know if it's blue, that it's for me, and if it's orange, it's for both of us, and if pink, it's for her. And all the tickets and everything are in there. And I have absolutely no shares in this company whatsoever. But things like that can help you with your distraction. Like I was saying to the piece to camera earlier, it's never been a better time to be a neurodivergent because there's so many things to help with neurodivergence. So look at things that get you distracted or where you struggle with distraction and try and work on it.
So relatable. One of the other alternative names for this podcast a year and a half ago when I started it was, did you hear what I just said? Very relatable.
100%, yeah.
Alcohol. It's a topic that keeps coming up on this podcast. There's a bottle of beer behind you or someone's ADHD item. It comes up most episodes. Alcohol on a first date, a good idea for someone with ADHD?
This is a question that is so full of nuance and so full of the person. And I think there's been this crazy boom in the last 5 months of, if you've got ADHD, don't drink alcohol. Like that and that's like the hook. And it's coming from quite big voices. And I somewhat disagree with that, because I'm kind of a take it or leave it type of alcohol guy. I can have a pint. I can go to the pub, have one pint, really enjoy it, and then go home. And I don't then want to drink 3 bottles of vodka and stuff. And so, but I enjoy the pint. Maybe I'm kind of very continental type of thing, the little glass of wine at dinner or whatever. And I think maybe that's because my parents both grew up in Italy and France, that wine was always just something that was on our dinner table, and it was one glass. So I never saw this kind of like associated alcohol with binge drinking. I always associate it with, that's my end of the day treat, and it was one glass. And the bottle of wine would be the bottle of wine for the week, near enough. You know what I mean? It would stay there open Monday to kind of Thursday, Friday. And so I feel like you have to understand your relationship with alcohol. And I also think you have to understand, why are you drinking? Are you drinking because you're anxious, or are you drinking to stop thoughts, or are you drinking because of those reasons? Or are you having a drink because you've just done a big long walk along, Victoria Park, and you just fancy getting a beer at the end of it, or a glass of wine, or a van show at Christmas at a Christmas market? I don't think there's absolutely anything wrong with that at all. But are you drinking because you're anxious and nervous and you want to suppress those feelings? That can lead to something very, very dangerous, where you're going to start overcompensating, drink too quick, overshare and say something that you're going to regret, have anxiety about it, go home, probably ghost because you've got shame. So do something before the alcohol, I think, is a great thing to do. So you can do one of those activity dates, and then maybe you go for a drink at the end if you both drink, or do something where it's not binge drinking alcohol either, where you're just sitting in a bar and it's there in front of you. Maybe even go like, you wouldn't do this on a first date, but wine tasting or something like that. We can have little sips, you spit it out, whatever, if you really need a drink. But I think it's up to the person. And I think there's a big pressure at the minute to cut alcohol out of everything. It's become the 2024 version of smoking, right? Where it's just, there's a lot of countries that are banning the advertising of it. It's getting stronger regulation. Even in this country, there's much more stronger regulation north of the border. My dad's side of the family from Scotland, there's minimum unit pricing. There's only certain times it can be sold. So our opinion, and the younger generation of Gen Zs are changing how they view alcohol. But I think alcohol is a very personal thing. And I think if you can enjoy it and it doesn't affect your life, I've got absolutely no problem with you having a glass of wine or a couple of beers on your first date at all.
You mentioned ghosting there, and I think ghosting is such a hard one to swallow, particularly with someone with ADHD, especially with RSD. If you go on a date and then that person never replies to your texts, completely ignore you for the rest of time. What is the relationship, do you think, between ghosting and ADHD?
I think it comes a lot from inherent shame. And I was talking about this in terms of my professional life, which is everything is my fault. Okay. And I think you feel very much, this kind of persuasion as well, which is anything that happens which can be perceived as negative is my fault. And so you could have, this is why alcohol, by the way, to go back to your question before, this is why too much alcohol can be bad, because you can overshare, say something that might be offensive, say something that you shouldn't have said that was private because you just wanted to see the reaction. Then you go back, you have the shame in the taxi. I shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have said that. That woman, that person hates me. And then you don't want to deal with it, so you just ghost. Because you don't want to deal with them confronting your fears. And so I feel like ghosting sometimes is a mechanism of defending ourselves from more pain than we're already causing ourselves from the RSD. Because I'm already beating myself up about it. I don't need the validation of then you beating me up about it as well, because then it makes my anxieties real. And then if my anxieties are real this time, that means next time, the time after, they're real. They can be real. If anxiety is in your head, it's still just in your head, which is much easier to deal with than someone going, yeah, you offended me and you shouldn't have said that. That stings. And that takes your RSD from I'm dealing with it to I'm dealing with it because it's me that's beating myself up to now I'm dealing it because it's actually true. And that's where the ghosting can come in, because you don't want to have to deal with being confronted with your worst fear, which is that your anxiety is right.
So if someone's ghosting someone because they feel shame and they're avoiding the situation, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. If you're on the other end of that and you're the person being ghosted, do you have any advice for that person?
Yeah, so I would literally just bring it up and just give them time, though. Right? ADHD people's perception of time is hilarious, and that's me too. Like, if you don't get back to an email from me that I sent like in the morning, at the evening, I'm like, they're ignoring me. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, like for instance, right now I've been here for a couple of hours, right? There could be people emailing me and they're not sitting there going, he's ignoring me. I'm just working, right? Yeah. But you need to have perception of time. People are so busy, you know what I mean? Especially people have different jobs. Some people work from home, some people don't. There's more chance for you to get your phone out and things like that. I would follow up after the date just to make sure someone gets home all right, because I think that's just a nice thing to do anyway. And it's a very unintrusive, that's obviously if you've gone home separately or whatever, like it's a very unintrusive way to be kind and say, hey, I had a great time. Did you make it home? Blah, blah, blah. That will give you an opportunity there, by the way, for either side to say it was really great, but I don't think there's the spark or whatever it is. And that's totally fine, by the way. But then after that, give it some time. If you feel like you're not getting anywhere after, I would say 3 days of no communication, then you can just pick it up. And I would just say something like, hey, just wanted to see if you had a good time the other night and you wanted to do something again, you know what I mean? And if you don't hear anything back from that, I think you'd be like, just message them and say, like, you can say whatever you want, basically, just to end it there and say, like, I'm going to move on now. I'm not getting the conversation back. A lot of actual apps, and it's not just us that do it, will prompt the user if they're ghosting people, because it could be just like they've completely, they're just having a manic week. People have manic weeks, especially, I used to work in event management. I used to have manic months, do you know what I mean, where I was never on my phone, and luckily I wasn't doing any online dating when I was working in event management. So it can be just that they haven't got the time. But I think it's fine to call it out, but give time before you look like. And that, I know that's difficult for the ADHDers. I am one of you, so I get it. You want that validation there and then, especially if you like them. When's the next date? You can also kind of get a vibe on the date as well, I suppose. If you at the end of the date, you're like, you fancy doing something again sometime, if that, you can feel if someone's interested, they're smiling, there might be a slight, hand touch or whatever it is, but you can feel the energy, especially if you've got ADHD, use that intuition to your advantage, and maybe get your calendars out when you're there, and then you don't have that anxiety. But if you are talking on the app and you're not getting anywhere after about 3-4 days, just drop a message and see if they're up for doing something again. If they don't reply to that, then just move to the next. Thank you.
Truly fascinating. Thank you, Jamie. We have a closing tradition on the podcast where we ask all our guests what their most impulsive thing they've ever done is.
Oh, my goodness me. Oh, what's the most impulsive thing I've ever done to myself? In fact, I did something really impulsive yesterday. I don't know if it's the most impulsive thing I've ever done, but it's the most impulsive thing I've done in a long time. I'll give that as an example. But running a business, and obviously you know this as a founder, is possibly the most stressful thing that anyone can do. It's just constantly hums of anxiety and worrying about how much money you've got in the bank and why doesn't everyone love your product, and reading a negative review on the thing. It's just soul destroying and exhausting, and you feel guilty about taking time off because you feel like I should always be on the business. But the problem is, if you're always doing that, you're never actually thinking about growth and those great, especially if you've got ADHD and you've got this amazing imagination, which, used to get trodden on when you were at school for daydreaming. I mean, the daydream created Mattr. I was standing out of a window, looking out of a window at a gym, and was like, why can't we just have an app that is like a safe space for all people? I was like, that's a great idea. So yesterday, there was a particular set of DJs that were all kind of coming together as a collective, and they're playing in Spain. And I was just thinking to myself, and they're old guys. It's an old school type of thing. It's like a throwback thing. And I was thinking how fantastic it would be to go to it. And I was just thinking, oh, that'd be amazing, but I can't. I'm not allowed to take time off or anything. And then I literally I don't know what came over me, but I thought, I'm going. Why can't I go? I'm going. And I just booked it there. And then I didn't even speak to my missus about it. I just said, I kind of said to her, like, I'm going to go. And she went, yeah, go. Why don't you go? Just do it. And I was like, yeah. And I just booked it. And then I asked a couple of my mates, and then they were like, yeah, I'm in. But that was after I'd already done it. So I would have actually gone on my own if no one had turned up. And I allowed my impulsivity to take over for once in a way where I was like, I'm going to give myself this treat. You're never going to see these people all together again in this one place. And I think that's probably the most impulsive thing I've done, which is literally just sitting on my couch, saw the flyer for it, beat myself up about even thinking about going, and then just went on Skyscanner and just booked it. And now, yeah. So the 24th of September, if you are in Ibiza, I will be at the Amnesia reunion party, and you can see me there. And I will be with friends because I have people to come to, but otherwise I would have been there on my own.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. That 2 days chilling back home, so I won't be away from business for too long.
This has been truly fascinating. Jamie, thank you very much.
It's been wonderful to sit here and talk to you. It's been really, really fascinating on my side too, so thank you.